Hello, today I'm talking to you about the journey that BankSITE Services has undergone using HAProxy Enterprise to help secure our network and our websites from attack for all the banks and credit unions that we host here in the United States. The techniques and methods that I'll be sharing today can be used by you as well to help you protect your clients' websites around the globe. My name is Devin Acosta. I'm a Red Hat certified architect, as well as a cybersecurity engineer. I've been doing information technology for a little over 20 years now, and I've worked for several Fortune 500 companies. Please ensure to check out my GitHub page, where I'll have lots of sample and examples of things throughout this presentation so that you can look at later. The problem isn't unique, right? You have a website that's constantly being scanned using a variety of different methods, whether it's a denial of a service, a cross-site scripting, or SQL injection. Your site throughout the day is probably experiencing these types of attacks nonstop. You simply cannot rely on a single technique today to protect your website from the various types of attacks. Instead, you need a layered approach to your security and your configuration within HAProxy to help protect your website and give it the best defense. The solution that we have found at BankSITE is, of course, HAProxy Enterprise. With the combination of all the different modules that you can enable and the advanced filtering rules, you can really protect your website and actually get some sleep at night. 5 years ago when I came on board with BankSITE, we were experiencing several attacks a week, and many of these different attacks would actually cause up to 5-minute outages at times because the sheer amount of traffic coming in would overwhelm the Apache and MySQL processes running behind, and HAProxy has literally changed the way that we deal with the problem and actually allows us to get a good night's sleep. The solution that I find that works really well for us to help protect our websites is using a layered approach to our security, much like you do in cybersecurity. Each of these different layers protects the web server from a variety of different attacks using different modules and or different types of rules within HAProxy. I'm going to briefly go over the 5 layers real quickly, and then I'm going to dive into each layer in more depth. The first layer is your typical block list, allowing and disallowing IP addresses into your network based upon some list. The second layer is using user agent rules, so either allowing or disallowing traffic based upon the user agent being reported. The third layer we're using is the MaxMine ISP and country database. The fourth layer is the HAProxy stick tables feature. And the fifth layer is using mod security. All of our logs are sent to Elasticsearch for ingestion, and then we do use additional processes to query that Elasticsearch and to generate our own list based upon active traffic that we're seeing. So going back into the levels in more detail, layer 1 back to the block lists, if you're like me 5 years ago, finding trustworthy lists can be hard to do, right? There's so many lists out on the internet. Some are updated regularly. Some lists have kind of got created and then kind of died. And then some lists might not generate really good data. So luckily I found an open source project called Firehall. Firehall is an open source firewall project. And the beautiful thing is they've done all the research and work for us. If you go to Firehall's website, especially their GitHub page, you can actually see every single list that's out there on the internet, how often the lists are updated, how many IP addresses are on the list, and you can even see historical data, how many IPs are on the list day over day, week over week, month over month, and year over year. And it even tells you how often the lists are updated. And they even break down the block list into 4 different layers so that they help you know which lists to trust right away and which ones might need a little more work. The average list on Firehall is updated about every 6 hours. Some, though, are only updated every 12 hours or possibly once a day. As I mentioned, Firehall tries to help you with the block list to make it simple. They have what they call their 4 layers of protection or levels. If you enable level 1, level 2, and level 3 with Firehall, you can rest assured that you're not going to have any false positives. These are very, very trustworthy lists, and I can tell you from personal experience that I've had level 1, level 2, and level 3 enabled on all of our banks and credit unions for the last 2 years, and I've not had a single customer call and complain to me that we were blocking legitimate traffic. So you can easily enable level 1, level 2, and level 3 with Firehall and not even lose any sleep over it. Now, when you do get to level 4 with Firehall, they even say within their list that this list has potentially some false positives. And so when you do enable it, you will want to do so with discretion, or maybe enable it in a test and dev environment and just see how it works for you. Moving on to the next layer, a layer 2 of the user agents. Because we receive, a lot of the traffic that we receive is people running vulnerability scans or trying to do SQL injection or cross-site scripting against our sites. So blocking on the user agent has been very useful. I would say on an average day, we probably see 2 to 3 different people trying to run OpenVAS scans against our network on a typical day, right? Before, all of those scans would have hit our Apache and MySQL instances, and because we're using WordPress on the back end, that could cause quite a bit of load onto our instances. So being able to block these type of user agents at the firewall or our load balancer in particular, it actually has saved us a lot of resources and slowness in websites because people are scanning our websites at random. Layer 3 is going into the MaxMine IP database. And the beautiful thing about this is because our users are mainly here within the United States, we can actually do some really cool rules. We actually allow our customers within a portal that we have enable or disable countries based upon the bank's preference, right? We have some banks, for instance, that are inside of Guam or the islands around Guam. And some of the problems that these banks have had is they might only offer their services to certain islands around Guam. And in particular, we had one bank that kept getting credit card applications and mortgage applications from an island that they do not provide service. So using the MaxMine ISP database, we were able to allow this bank to block access of their website to this island so they don't receive credit card and mortgage applications where they don't provide service. And additionally, we offer this service to all of our customers. So a bank can easily select what countries they want to be able to see their website and what countries they do not want. In addition to the MaxMine ISP database, we actually can allow our customers to block or be more aggressive on our rules based upon the internet connection coming in. For instance, we know that our banking users are coming from their home most of the time or their business. So these users are on DSL, cable modem, right? Possibly dial-up and or some other kind of Wi-Fi access point. We know that their users are not coming from Amazon Web Services. They're not coming from Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure or any of those other VPS hosting. So we can actually write very aggressive rules so that if a request comes in from Amazon Web Services, we can be very aggressive with that rule because we know that at the end of the day, that is not one of our banking customers. They're just not coming from Amazon Web Services. And the same with Google Cloud and Microsoft Azure. So the MaxMine GeoIP database allows us to write rules based upon the internet connection and also where they're coming from. One of the things to do note is that MaxMind does offer a free version of the country database, but it's not as accurate as the paid version. In addition, there is no free version to the ISP database. That's only a paid offering. So do know that you probably will want to pay and subscribe to those lists if you want to use those databases and have much more accuracy. Here on the slide, you can see in this example that you can see here, I'm just giving you an example of how we're loading the country database and how we're loading the ISP database. Now, one of the things that I always do stress with HAProxy is that you customize your logs and don't just accept the defaults. Because logging is everything to us, we want those logs to be as informative as possible. And so the log format that you can see here at the very bottom of the screen, you can actually see that I added a special field, what I call the blocked reason field. And the blocked reason field tells me very easily why we blocked that request, right? Because, at the end of the day, if it's 7 in the morning and I got a message from a bank saying, hey, you blocked a request, the last thing I want to do is spend 10 minutes trying to figure out why we blocked them. So right in the log of each request, it tells you very specifically, we're blocking this request because of X. And in this particular reason, we're blocking because they're coming from the country Canada, and this customer decided to block Canada. And what in this example I'm showing you is that we're setting a variable for country based upon the country that the IP looked up as, and then we're setting a variable that we're calling block source, and we're concatenating the words block country to equal the country that was reserved up above. And with every rule, every time we're doing a block, we're doing a similar stanza within our HAProxy configuration. So that way, if we end up blocking because of a block list, we know what block list it was and that it was blocked because of a blocked list. Or if we're blocking because of, they matched a user agent, we know it says right in the log, blocked because of user agent, and this was the user agent. So the logs give us very clear details about the request, why it was blocked. And then furthermore, when we go into Elasticsearch, we can actually run reports to see on an average day, why was all of these requests blocked? And we can get statistics around those. One of the very beautiful things about the more recent features of HAProxy Enterprise is the dynamic responsibility. And the beautiful thing with dynamic response is because we're allowing our banks and credit unions to block based on the country, rather than returning to their users a blank page with a 403 message, we can actually render to them a single one-page version of their website, allowing their users in blocked countries to still get to online banking. Because most of the bank customers, when they're out of the country, the only thing they really care about is getting to online banking. They don't care about checking out the personal checking and savings accounts, right? So using HAProxy's dynamic response, you can see here on the left, right, this is a fictitious bank and what the page would look like if they were within the country that allowing the traffic. But on the right, you can see when a user, say, went to South Africa and the bank decided to block South Africa, rather than getting that generic 403 page, they would get a one-page version of the website, still allowing the user get to online banking. And the banks have really loved this feature because, number one, it decreases the number of calls to their call center because the bank decided to block a country and they didn't know that their user ended up going on vacation to that country. So dynamic response has been a very beautiful feature for us and our banks are simply loving it. Going on to layer 4, stick tables. The beautiful thing with stick tables is it allows you to basically rate limit requests coming in based upon either the number of errors they're generating or based upon the number of requests that are coming in, right? Because when attacks come in, right, they could come in very slowly, or they could come in very aggressively. And using stick tables, you can write rules to basically catch both types of those scenarios. So if you're definitely not using stick tables today, I highly recommend it. And again, as I mentioned before, with stick tables, we actually have rules that rate limit at a different rate if you're coming from the cloud or from like a VPS versus if you're coming in through a cable modem or DSL. And stick tables allows us to easily do this. The next feature, layer 5 for us, is mod security. It is obviously, a little more in depth as far as the amount of work it requires to get it going. So it's not a feature that you just enable, set it, and forget it. Instead, right, you do need to enable it, possibly because there possibly could be some false positives. And so you might need to do a little bit of tuning before you roll it out into production. So I highly recommend, if you're not looking at mod security, to really look at it and helping you protect your network. Next, I'll briefly mention how you can actually use HAProxy Enterprise as your hub, like we're doing. So for instance, we use a SIM called Waza, and Waza is an open source SIM, with its own set of rules. And basically, Waza also monitors all of the log files, whether they're system files or Apache files, and it has its own rule system. And the beautiful thing is, because Waza has a built-in active response system, Waza can actually, when it fires a rule, it can actually talk to an API, and then we can ingest that with HAProxy Enterprise. And so let me give you an example here. So if you look at this diagram, you'll see that we have Waza, and I created a Python API that basically accepts the requests coming in from Waza, converts them into a dynamic list, and then I have HAProxy Enterprise ingesting that. And the beautiful thing is, so if for some reason a request gets past all my rules, right, Waza still has the ability to make its own decision and decide, do I want to allow or disallow this traffic in? And if Waza says, even though it made it past all of HAProxy rules, I still want to block it. So using this functionality, I'm able to allow Waza to notify HAProxy to block the traffic. And so you can see, if you have a third-party program, that you could write your own APIs and then have HAProxy ingest that using dynamic update. The last thing I would like to talk to you about is logging. Again, I've worked in many different companies. What always made me, I guess, baffled at the end of the day was so many companies are not either looking at their logs or they're just not logging in general. And because everything that we do at BankSITE is websites, I want to always know what's going on in the network, right? The worst thing that could happen to you is something is happening on your network and you don't even know that it's happening. And so what I highly suggest that you do is install FluentD and send your logs to Elasticsearch. And the reason I use FluentD is because FluentD is very versatile and it allows much easier configuration than using Logstash. I was never a fan of Logstash because it was kind of bloated and at times could be difficult to use. So instead, I use FluentD. And on my GitHub page, I have all the examples of my FluentD configuration, as well as the modified HAProxy plugin that I've modified to allow it to take my new HAProxy log format and to send it off to Elasticsearch. You can see here in this slide the current log format that I'm using within my HAProxy Enterprise. And then you can also see, again, my modified plugin. And the cool thing about FluentD is as each web request gets ingested with FluentD, it actually has, and it actually enhances the data of the request coming in. So for instance, in my default log format, I'm not actually logging within the HAProxy log, the country, the city, the state, those kinds of things. But instead, I'm having FluentD enrich the data before it gets into logs into Elasticsearch, and then I'm getting that enhanced data within within Elasticsearch. So you can see here, for instance, when this is an example of the FluentD configuration, so that when a log comes in, it actually looks up the IP using the GeoIP database, and then it creates new records of city, latitude, longitude, country name, postal code, and region name. And so when the log actually gets written to Elasticsearch, as you can see in the slide here, we've added everything that's in blue. So what's in black came from HAProxy Enterprise using my customized log format, but what's in blue got added by FluentD. And so then we can actually do some really cool reports within Elasticsearch. So for instance, like on a bank, I can have it plot within Elasticsearch everywhere their users are coming from. So I can show a picture of the United States, and for one particular bank, it can show dots in all of the cities and states that all their customers are coming from. And we can do other kinds of cool stuff like that. Here's an example of a report that I did for the last month, showing all of the blocks that we're doing across all of our banks and how many times they actually did a match. And so you can see here for the block URLs, we actually had 1.9 million blocks on our network. And you can see our blacklisted user agents, we had 897,000 blocks. Additionally, going back to Firehall and the level 1, level 2, and level 3 lists, you can see that the number one block list that is being blocked is the block list net UA, and it had 600,000 blocks just because it was on the bad list. And so you can see here, we're doing over several million blocks alone that Apache and MySQL didn't even have to waste CPU cycles on, because HAProxy was able to block the traffic right away. And even down here at the bottom, you can see with Waza, it did 23,000 blocks because it matched a Waza rule. So you can see that the power of sending all of your logs to Elasticsearch can have. In addition, I'm in the current process of creating our own internal block list based upon live traffic that we're seeing. So what I'm actually creating right now is a rule that will run every single night, look at all the 404s coming in, see what IP addresses those are coming from, and if we find a single IP address doing quite a bit of 404s, then I can start to block those IP addresses from my own block list. And then that way I'm doing live kind of reactive blocking based upon stuff I'm actively seeing within our infrastructure. So having everything in Elasticsearch really allows you a lot of flexibility down the road to do some really cool stuff with your data. And with that, I will get to the questions and answers. Thank you for watching my presentation.
Great, and now we have Devin joining us here live. Devin, thank you so much for the talk, and thank you for joining us here today.
No problem. Glad to be here.
As a reminder to everyone, you can submit questions for Devin in the general chat, and so we'll try to pick those up and get to them as time allows, and you can also submit them on Twitter using hashtag HAProxyConf. All right, so we'll get right into it. Devin, first question up is, what got you interested in this topic of security in the first place? For you, did it grow out of a specific need, or have you always been interested in security in general?
I kind of got thrown into it. One of my first jobs working at an internet service provider in Utah, we were running Red Hat 3 back then. And I remember within the first 6 months of working there, I think we had like 3 Linux servers get hacked. So security has always been an issue, at least in my career, dealing with Linux.
Security always goes back to the war stories. All right, we have another a question in the chat. Now that HAProxy has a data plane API, will you be removing the Python API interface to Waza and going directly into HAProxy Data Plane API?
Yeah, I probably need to look at that. To be honest, I haven't really looked at the data plane API as much as I probably need to, but it definitely would make sense to remove my custom Python code. Why have something there that doesn't need to be there if there's a better way of doing it?
Yep, makes sense. So you've been in this field for over 20 years. You've seen a lot of good and probably some bad security practices at in your various roles in various organizations. Do you have a feeling about how the industry is trending when it comes to security awareness?
Yeah, I definitely think companies, with all the breaches and hacks, security definitely is on the forefront, I think, of everyone's mind. I still, with talking to a lot of my security friends, I still think there's a lot of, improvement and companies still need to put more effort there. But I definitely think, a lot more focus has been put there than previously.
So during your presentation, you listed many sources from which you can get lists of IP addresses to block. Has it been easy to import these data sources, and what advice would you give to others looking to do the same thing?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, if you download the Firehall package from their website, they have an automated script, and that script literally shows you every single list out on the internet, and you can enable and disable whichever list you care about. And the output format that it provides is actually the format that HAProxy needs to ingest. And it throws all of those into a single directory. So it's very easy using the web call to fetch the files to import into HAProxy. So I would just say use what Firehall already provides you.
Yep, don't reinvent the wheel. So in your talk, Devin, you had listed 5 different layers of security. Is there one layer that stands out above the rest as the most important to have or maybe to start with, or are they all just as important?
I think they're all right. Security needs to be a layered approach. So I think they're all important. But what I have found, dealing with the banks, the block lists were the easiest to implement, and they gave the biggest bang for the buck right out the door. But I think start with the block lists and then move from there.
We have another one from the chat. Is there a GitHub repo for some of the amazing work from Devin?
Yeah, so it is listed on the slides. I will be adding some other examples to my GitHub page later today. But yeah, I have already uploaded all of my FluentD configs and my modified FluentD plugin. But I'll definitely give more examples of what I've been doing, so people can use it as a reference.
Awesome. And we will be sharing the recording of your talk separately in a couple weeks as well, standalone, so that folks can see the links there and how to how to access any of that information. Another question from the chat: are you using a separate HAProxy instance for all the security stuff, for the whole stream, and another HAProxy using routing to backends, or is it all just one instance?
No, I'm using one instance for everything.
All right. So I think that's about all we have time for. Devin, thank you so much for the opportunity to learn more about using HAProxy Enterprise to, really level up your security defenses. Are there any last tips or thoughts that you want to leave with the audience?
No, I would just say, if you're not using HAProxy today to protect your websites, you probably should be. I just want to thank everyone for watching my presentation.
Well, we want to thank you, Devin, as well. Thank you so much for your presentation and for tuning in here for the live Q&A. We really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoy the remainder of the conference.
All right, take care.